Hey everybody, it's Carl here and welcome to a new video for Level Design Breakdown, and the focus for today's video is of course 2D level design. And in the last video we created a 2D design kit, which is this first point here, and in this video we'll be creating a full level using that design kit, or at least something similar to it. Now, the first thing that you should note is that I have a few points that I want to go through during this video, and the first point is, and I already mentioned it, is the importance of having a good design kit. Now, I'll be using my own, of course, but I encourage you to go out there and make your own, and more importantly, make one that suits your game specifically. The next 2 points, and they kind of relate to each other, is level timing and scene division, and level flow, which relates directly to those 2 points. However, they're both two different things, and I'll go into greater detail during the actual level design process. Excuse me. And the last one is, why should we be playtesting? It's a very important point, and again, I'll touch on that as I build the game. Sorry, not the game, the level itself. So, without further ado, the video is going to go to black, but when we return we'll be in Unity and we'll be actually building the whole scene. Okay, so now we're actually in Unity, and I should mention this now that the current sprite sheet that I'm using to my level design kit actually isn't enough. When I was building the level, it wasn't enough, so this brings me to my point of having an effective design kit. When you're creating a design kit, make sure you take into account everything that you'll be using. So for my design kit, I was able to cover things like the floor and walls, which is pretty much what you need to do at this stage, but I completely forgot about one of the most important things of my game, and that is doors, and also ladders, or something to represent doors and ladders at this early stage. So what I did instead was I grabbed my character sprite sheet and used the spare space from that to create doors and ladder stand-in pieces, basically. Excuse me, I'm a little bit sick today. But basically what I'm doing is this first room. It's almost done. And really there's not much to teach in that first room. That's pretty much done, that's it. But basically, this first room is all about teaching the player two things. Moving left and right, and object interaction. Basically, left and right to get to that door, and then interacting with the door. Those are the first two things that I want to teach the player in this game. But more importantly, that room is all about setting a background story for our character, for the game world, and everything like that. You know, cutscenes, and sort of, if you're making a game like Super Mario Brothers, it probably wouldn't matter as much. Now, this next scene that I've already started building is all about teaching the player the next two skills that they'll need to survive the game, and that is jumping and climbing. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what about things like shooting and attacking? That'll come in later. And the reason why I've divided all these areas up, it's actually divided into 3 separate areas, is because I wanted to teach the player the aspects of the game at a slower pace. The reason for that is because I've decided that this should be a story-driven game. And what I found from playing story-driven games is that it's not a definite, it's not a rule, but what I found is that story-driven games generally have a much slower learning curve, much steadier learning curve than games like Super Mario. They tend to have, it's a 5-second reaction. It's a very reaction-based game. So if we go back to the example of Super Mario 1985, the first scene, level 1, World 1, Level 1. You have Super Mario starting off in the left corner of the world, and there's a Goomba. You have 5 seconds, roughly, to react and figure out how to jump. If you didn't, then you died. But good thing about that is that you start instantly. That sort of approach doesn't exactly work for story-driven levels because, well, for story-driven levels, you have to be able to tell them, well, this is the environment that the characters or the character or characters live in. This is the kind of world that they inhabit, and this is where you are at the moment. And so you need to be able to teach the players, your audience, at a similar pace. And here, what I'm actually building is the foundation of the teaching aspect, and that is jumping. The first thing I want to teach them is to jump. Well, the first thing I want to teach them in this room, in this particular area, is to jump, and then climb. And then towards the end of the level, you want to combine those two and actually reinforce them. Because, well, it's a 2D platformer, and obviously there's got to be platforms for a 2D platformer, right? And that's what you want. Well, at least that's one of the goals that you should be aiming for. Okay, sometimes, well, this being a 2D platformer, you won't be able to see things in 3D, so you can't really explore, but that should not stop you from actually creating a bit of background. Now, I'm just making a few fixes because I made a mistake, and this next area, this area below the character that I'm currently building, I'm actually going to close it off. So it's basically inaccessible. The reason why I'm doing that is because I want to actually create a bit of a story to it. Like I said, story driven. You want to have a little bit more, you want to pay a little bit more attention to the environment, to how the characters react to the environment, the overall mood and feel of the game. Not that gameplay should be thrown out the window, but it's, in the case of story-driven games, the environment and the characters and the depth of those characters and personalities is very important to, I guess, the progression of the game. So I'm just finishing off the elevator shaft, where we'll be teaching the players how to jump and eventually climb. What I realized watching this back is actually I have a 1x4 piece for the background, which is the darker sprites. I don't actually realize that until towards the end of building this area. Okay, so here I'm actually thinking, well, we only need to teach the players a couple of things like jumping and climbing. Maybe we can teach them other aspects of the game in a separate section of the building, or separate section of the area. And I actually do try this out in this section, I think. Put a door on that floor that you can get to, I'm pretty sure. And the original design actually had me sort of creating 4 sections to the level 1, to the level that we're making. But having tested it out, I figured that it's probably best not to have 4 separate sections, especially since we're only teaching the player so very few skills. And this is where that idea of spacing comes in. So basically, if you make your level too lengthy, or you make the section of a level too lengthy, then it gets boring. If it's not lengthy enough, you might not be giving the player enough of a chance to learn the ins and outs. So what I decided to do was actually have one section where we teach the player and one section where we reinforce it, basically. And that's this section here. That's the reason why I'm building this other section here instead of actually creating a separate room for it. And there we go. I'm sort of building it up a little bit. In terms of graphics, I haven't really thought that much about what kind of graphics this will have for the next video, really. I have an idea. I'm not going to tell you guys what it is now, but I'm still a little bit iffy as to whether or not I should go ahead with my current design choice. But again, here I'm just reinforcing the basic platforming skills: jumping, moving left and right, and in this case climbing. Now, not all 2D platformers have climbing, but I can't think of any off the top of my head that don't. Okay, just finishing this. I might need to extend that out because it's supposed to be a stairwell, not another elevator shaft. And right now it looks like an elevator shaft, so I need to change that to look more like a stairwell. Now, again, like I said, this is all about reinforcing the skills that they've already attained. And you'll notice that I haven't really reinforced object interaction. And pretty much that's what I'm going to be doing by adding an actual working elevator. That's really the whole point of this building. It's supposed to be multi-story, and even though it's not the whole building, this is pretty it's adequate. Okay, this is where I actually start building the climbing section of the level, but I find that the piece that I'm using to represent the door isn't enough. So I actually, what I actually ended up doing was going into Photoshop, adjusting the player sprite sheet, and then creating climbing pieces like these two purple pieces here. Obviously, they're just placeholders. That's not what they're gonna look like at the end. But they're roughly they are the right length and width. So that's an approximation. It's good enough. It'll work. Just finishing it off, and you can see what I mean by spacing and level flow, right? You want to still be able to teach the player and reinforce the skills that they've already picked up from the first 5 minutes of the game. The way that you set out your levels is going to affect the level flow, and that's what you want to sort of incorporate when it comes to reinforcing skills. Is you want to say, hey, this bit is supposed to be for, I don't know, teaching the player how to jump and climb, right? So you need to be able to have the level sort of adapt to that, and I think I've got it. I can't say for sure that it'll work 100%, mainly because I don't have any climbing code yet. Once I do get that down, then I'll be able to properly establish whether or not I can. So here we go. We're reinforcing object interaction, and that's going to affect the flow in that the player will be able to sort of go ahead and skip pretty much, I think it's half the building. I think it is. And I just make a prefab out of that. Because, well, if you're going to be using it once in your game, it's very likely that you'll be using it again at another time. So when you're building your own game, use prefabs, create prefabs, because it'll help. It will definitely help. Okay, this bit is, again, they'll be interacting with an elevator, and what the elevators do, they go up and down. And basically I'm just creating, again, space to sort of really put the player into a scene, into the world that they'll be walking around in. And even though you're indoors, you still need to be able to reflect what's going on outside, and that's what I've attempted here. I'm likely going to end up changing the design, the overall level design, a little bit, but at this stage it's looking okay. So again, these areas, they're not gonna have any gameplay to them. It's just all for the looks of it. And like I said, it's used as a framing tool, so a context building tool basically. And we're gonna build the last bit of this area, and that is basically the exit, because we've pretty much taught the player everything that they need to know for this area, so we don't need to prolong it. So that's where spacing and level division or scene division comes into play. You don't have to divide your levels up. That's just a personal design decision that I made. And yep, that's just, it's completely up to you whether you want to cut up your tutorial level. Like I said, this is level 1. It's completely up to you whether you want to do that or not. I just find it much easier to divide things so that I can weave story in with gameplay, right? That essentially that's your goal, but at this stage it's still sort of working things out. Now I'm not sure why I blocked that off, to be perfectly honest. I think it had something to do with my elevator code. Okay, here, this door, it's an adventure game. Why put the door all the way at the end of the corridor when we can put it somewhere halfway? And maybe if the player is adventurous enough, they'll decide to keep going further, and obviously they'll be duly rewarded. I mean, that's essentially what adventure games are all about. Exploration and getting something out of it. So you don't want to sort of flip them the bird and just say, well, there's nothing here. That's just not right. You want to make it fair. You want to give players a reason to explore the world that you've built. So you should reward them for that. And just checking all the sprites that I'm using are the right ones. You don't want to end up using the wrong sprites. It's the worst thing that could happen. And what happens next? This is pretty much done. I've taught the player the things that they need to know for this, but also if you're gonna add in the aspect of rewarding for exploration, that would have been the place to do it, because you generally find, collectibles. Easy collectibles are generally found in the first few minutes or in the first scene even. But really, that's completely up to you as the designer to work that out, and that's where you should be playtesting. And you should be playtesting often. Whenever you make a change, and I mean like a big change or a big addition, you should take a step back, playtest the game yourself, get somebody else to playtest it, and then sort of ask them for feedback, because ultimately at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be playing your game, and they're the ones that are going to be buying the game, and you'll get your score, I guess, will reflect whether or not you listen to feedback or not. This next scene is all about introducing and reinforcing I guess the biggest component of this particular game, that is like attacking and shooting and using items, basically using equipment. And really, when it comes to games like even Super Mario and some of the more complicated games like The Last of Us, you can pick up those kind of skills really quickly, so you don't actually need that much space to teach them. If anything, this last area is all about just introducing the player to the outside world of the game, and we're basically telling them, hey, you're pretty much about to leave the safe zone now, so heads up. Essentially. So basically we have this corridor here, and that's going to lead to an outside area. That outside area is going to introduce us to what exactly is going on out there that makes this world what it is. Now, looking at this, I think the corridor might just be a bit too long. So in this case, well, it depends on what you want this area to represent, or rather what you want a particular area to represent. So if it's going to be a mix of both cutscene and gameplay, make sure you adjust it accordingly. If it's just cutscene, it should be a small scene. If it's like a big gameplay scene, like a boss fight, or maybe you're teaching the player several skills at the same time, then maybe a slightly longer level or a more in-depth level would probably do much good. So here, this is pretty much the end of the level, and the video is going to go to black very soon, and we're just about to wrap it up. Alright guys, now that we've finished everything that we needed to cover, we're going to go ahead and just recap what we covered today. First thing is, we have spoken about why we should have a good design kit. Let's check that. We also had a good look at level timing and the level flow, and how important it is that you keep these two in tandem. And of course, the importance of playtesting. Now, you should playtest. Not only should you, the developer, be playtesting, but you should get other people to playtest as well, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be playing your game. They're the ones that are going to be judging it. So make sure that you have this point. This point is extremely important. Make sure that you get this down and make sure that the audience is happy with it, not just yourselves. So in the next video, we're going to be putting in all the graphics, all the pretty stuff that makes a level what it is, and I will be going through the process of how I make 2D level parts. It's almost the same as actually creating the design kit, but I'm still going to make a video for it. But until then, I hope you learned something from today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And please, if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. Until next time, guys, I'll see you all later. Bye.